All right. Well, welcome back. This is a very special edition of the Happier Hour podcast, Philosophy to Help Life Suck Less. I am here at Podcast Row at Stand Up New York. If you've listened to any of the previous episodes, because I'm pretty sure these are going to each get their own episode. We'll see. We'll see how it all goes. It's a fun adventure. So normally these shows are, I have an academic philosopher, a philosophic-ish guest. I tie them each into a philosopher of yore, and there's an audience Q&A, and it's in front of a live audience. This time, I'm very honored because we're doing back-to-back interviews with different entrepreneurs and sort of like tying each of you into a philosopher or a philosophic idea on the spot, which is pretty fun. It's like a fun quiz for testing my knowledge. So just so you know that's the gist of the show, because you've been doing these back to back all day as well, right?
Yes, I have. For the first time. This is my first time ever doing this stuff.
Oh wow! Well, way to throw yourself in the fire. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So normally when you go on shows, oftentimes the host will read your bio. I would love to hear in your own words, if you want to give your own introduction, like a 2-minute, tell me about yourself.
Yeah, sure. All right. So let me start from my childhood because that's
Great.
where everything begins. I'm going to start with my parents. So they're nationality-wise, they're Puerto Rican, my father, and my mother's Korean. They met during my father actually being in the military, of course, and they met in Korea. Growing up, I'm going to switch it real quick, is basically I grew up in a kind of like a abusive household, a violent household. And that's only because my father and my mother now suffer from mental illness. My father having the worst of it, he has schizophrenia.
Oh, wow.
So I was basically brought up with a father that had a mental illness. And like a lot of young boys, they always look up to their father. So I really love my dad. I always looked up to him. And I thought the things that he was doing at an early age was things you were supposed to be doing. I thought they were normal. You know what I mean? It was very chaotic and abusive. So primarily, that's what I remember. A lot of abuse, a lot of fighting, a lot of running, things like that from my mother. And that developed me at an early age to be extremely confused and not have a mind of my own. Not only that, I was very naive. So, pretty much that would be the negative portion of it. So we're gonna start with that. I guess a lot of people like the drama stuff first. So
Hey, it's actually what I should have asked you first.
Yeah.
Was to say your name.
Alex Burgos, Busy Carpenter Bee. So that's a company I just started this year.
Great. So pretty brutal childhood, it sounds like. And at what point did you begin working in carpentry?
Well, I always did that. You know what's crazy is that even though my father was abusive, it's opposite from a healthy family. So a healthy family would blow up a negative situation, like maybe once or twice a year, right? They blow it up. Oh no, it's like Freddy Krueger walked into the room. And me, it was opposite. I blew up whatever was good in the situation. It was quite the opposite. So it was magnified. And basically, I saw a glimpse of the goodness in my dad. You know what I mean? My mom was always a sweetheart, though. But she was tough. I remember, growing up, being a different nationality, too, and my mom running, from my dad at a young age. There was a time when we were in a shelter in Far Rockaway in Jamaica, Queens and stuff. And I was outside standing at a bus stop, basically, and these kids were bullying me and stuff like that, and they were taking my money. I don't know how my mom managed to find money. She would always give me money for snacks, and such. Awesome mom. And I never told my mom that they were doing that every single day. And I don't know how it happened. She found out, and miraculously, I don't know where, she's like Superwoman or whatever, a belt just came flying out of nowhere. She started whipping these kids. It was nuts. It was like, wow. I was like, oh my God, now these kids, I was thinking now these kids are really going to murder me right now. They were terrified after my mom did that. They gave me the money back. They were like, hey, you know what? just tell your mom to stay away from us and things like that. So she was a lot of a savior to us, and what she was going through a lot of the times. And I'd like to, give her a lot of credit because she was going through a lot of long suffering. You know what I mean? There's a phenomenon that I just realized that happens is my mom never had schizophrenia, right? But if you hang around somebody with schizophrenia for quite some time and you undergo stress in that type of relationship, you end up getting schizophrenia yourself. Something snaps in your brain, you get a chemical imbalance, and now you have it.
Wow.
It's a phenomenon that happens, and I believe it happened to my mother. Now, this type of psychology that I have is not no PhD or anything. That is real life, what I lived through. I was raised with somebody with mental illness. And to come out on the other side, understanding that, not being bitter, I would have to say is quite a feat for me. I'm proud of myself for having a positive attitude afterwards. And then also coming out with something beautiful that I can finally say it's mine. It's from my own thinking. And I have my own mind now.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about that, about what sort of how you've been able, like you said, to create something beautiful out of something that was really rough. I mean, you actually physically do that. So I know if for people listening to the podcast, you can't see it, but he has these beautiful necklaces here. I'm wearing one, and they really are quite stunning. Can you talk about how these necklaces came to be, and a little bit specifically about, again, like how you turned to carpentry and using your hands and tools to sort of come out of this rough situation?
All right. So basically how I came up with these hearts was basically my niece. So at the time I was very depressed, and my niece obviously didn't know. Well, we were celebrating Christmas at the time, and I just basically didn't have a mind of my own at that time either. Not too long ago, actually. I've been feeling that for quite some time. But during that time, she came to me. She asked me to help her with a project. It was like a science project, like a volcano, a rocket. So I was having so much fun. I was so happy being with her. Like, it was just so, I can't even explain it. You know what I mean? It was like so joyful. I forgot about all my heartache, my pain. And yeah.
And so you were playing with her around Christmas time, and then how did that turn into the
so
joy?
Basically because of that, I was so appreciative that I was moved. She kind of like pushed me because I always had these ideas, and I'm always a loving person. I want to make things for people, show them how affectionate I am, things like that. But she pushed me towards that direction, and I carved out a heart by hand out of purple heart, which is from Guyana. It's from South America, exotic wood. And I carved it out. I even made a special card and things like that. And I wrote down a special meaning for the heart. So it was like compassion, empathy, and things like that. And I sent it to my brother. And when he received it, he went crazy because he knew I did carpentry, but he didn't know the extent of my artistry and things like that. So that was like kind of like the first time. And his emotions and everything on the phone, the way he felt, it was just electric. You know what I mean? It was just like a lot of love, a lot of caring that we needed, that I needed to feel. And, right away he was like, you got to sell these things and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, little does he know that I already had these thoughts years in advance and stuff. But it's his daughter that actually pushed me through. So fast forwarding, I decided to do something special with these hearts. So to donate it to people like my parents that are suffering with mental illness, to give a portion of the proceeds to people that can't normally help themselves. You know what I mean? Whether they're physically, they can't move, or mentally, they're deficient somehow, to be able to help them. But in particular, my idea was, instead of sending or spreading this money out, you don't know where it's going, to be one of the first ones to basically automate it where people can see this money in real time. And then I already created content actually where I go to the hospitals, I ask them, what do you need? And they give me maybe a list of things that they need, how much it costs and things like that, and let the viewers decide what to put that money towards to help. And then we help that person, that child, and basically tell their story. So they'll be more willing to pay, and now they're connected to the hearts. They're more involved with the whole situation, and we learn more about possibly mental illness, possibly cancer, things, real relatable things that real people go through on a daily basis that is not on social media, that's not that sexy to talk about, you know what I mean? To talk about it on a daily basis, because that's what's really happening.
Well, and it's interesting because the symbolism then, like you said, it's you're wanting to connect with people who are going through these real things in real life that's not necessarily shared on social media, and you do so by creating something tangible, creating something with your hands. And it actually makes me think of, in ancient Greece, the term techne, which is the term that we now have derived technology from.
Right.
It actually meant something akin to craftsmanship, artistry, and it was also used somewhat interspersively with what we sort of think now as rhetoric, but it was actually considered a lower class form. Anything related to arts, even theater, whatever. It wasn't considered something very highbrow. Like there's a British aphorism that's something like something about not doing something with your hands. I think, gentlemen don't work with their hands. And it's so interesting because what a waste that was and how that's changed. And it's so funny because it's the same root of the word, techne, that now is like the fancy, way the world is being run now. Right. And there's this call to go back to craftsmanship and to go back to artistry.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also it makes me think, so there was William Morris, who was a poet and a designer.
Right. And
from what I understand, he really launched the arts and crafts movement in the 1860s.
Okay.
Saying that, there is value in having beautiful, well-made things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I was so fascinated about that, because to think that there was a time when craftsmanship wasn't valued is so weird to me. Yeah.
A lot of times too, like even now, everything is being automated. Yes. Even I own a CNC machine, which originally I was carving, so I couldn't mass produce it, right? I needed a machine to do that. CNC machine being a computer numeric control machine that carves the hearts that I'm making, right? A lot of it is going towards that. But the computer is an extension of your hand now, basically. The programs are. So, but it is still getting away from physically doing things. And I think that is extremely important to continue the artistry, especially for people with mental illness and things like that, because I think a lot of them are just geniuses, especially when it comes to artistry. They have a lot of imagination. They think about things that people are almost like afraid to think of a lot of times, and things that you will never think of in your wildest imagination. You know what I mean? So they're special too, even though they can't function like other people, they're extremely special. So my father, my mother, they're extremely special as well. And I love you guys.
Oh, well, and the value and the importance of recognizing that, expression comes in many, many forms.
Yeah.
And so some people, their skill is in working with their hands. Some people, like I would never be able to make what you've made. Tangible, anything
you
tangible.
Can. Give me a week and you'll do it.
I don't think, it's like how they talk about like Michelangelo, like he could hear the sculpture. And I actually really believe he could hear the sculpture.
Yeah.
Like he would say that the marble, that he would say like the marble tells me what to do. And that sounds so insane to people, but I don't actually doubt that's true. I don't actually doubt that he would look at the marble and truly feel like the marble was speaking to him and helping him know where to chisel,
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that concept is so foreign to so many of us. And what we do lose is a certain amount of personalization, which is so funny because people are obsessed with personalization these days, right? Like everybody wants like monogrammed things and their personality tests personalized. But when it comes to objects, you used to know, oh, well, so-and-so made that chair, Right. Even like in architecture, I believe that's how gargoyles came about, was it was sort of the, I don't know if you'd call that the architect or the designer, whoever was actually like making the house, that was, or the building, that was how they sort of identified
with the artist.
Yeah, with the artist. And I never
got
thought
you.
about that.
Yeah. It along the lines of, what'd you say Michelangelo did with the sculpture?
Oh, he said he could hear
it.
It would speak to him.
Yeah. I've heard musicians, in a little bit more relatable thing, like I heard musicians, like they just hear a song in their head and they got to wake up and write it down very quickly. So that really does exist, especially with artistry and things like that. And that's just our imagination working. Anybody could do that. It's in all of us. I believe it's in all of us. You know what I mean? When they say like certain people don't have the talent for that, I think that's bogus. I think that if you put enough work and time into it, you can be just as artistic as Michelangelo or anybody.
You can also be somebody who is extremely naturally gifted and squander your talents.
And squander it because you think you're too talented.
Yeah, or it doesn't mean anything to you. I mean, it's so interesting because this is the thing. I know it. I see this in my female friends more, I will admit that, in which something comes easy to them and so therefore it seems like less valuable versus like a lot of my guy friends are like, well, yeah, I'm awesome at that. Somebody pay me money for that. It's so fascinating. Like our own human perception it's not necessarily reality of our abilities. And like you said, putting in the work, which again, right now is not very popular. Like real craftsmen, I mean, that's years and years and years and years.
Yeah.
Really. To develop, to actually be able to consider yourself a craftsman, I would think.
I would say 5 years is you can consider yourself an expert. Like I've been listening. What's been helping me a lot is listening to like motivational guys like Tony Robbins or like Earl Nightingale, Les Brown, things like that. They actually helped me with my depression. But along the lines of what you were saying, I'm sorry, I lost the thought here.
Oh, no, talking about, now I forgot what I was because all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm curious. What did those guys say that helped you with depression? Talking about, craftsmanship, but taking 5 years, you feel like it takes about 5 years.
So Earl Nightingale said, if you take just an hour every day for 5 years on a certain subject, you're going to be a national expert at that field. And it doesn't matter if you don't know it. You will develop that skill. That our brains are that capable of doing that. And I know that for a fact because I never used the CNC machine before. As a matter of fact, I wanted to go to school in my union because I work full-time in the union. And
meaning, which union?
Local, I think they changed the law. I think it's Local 42 or
But it's a carpentry union?
Carpenters Union, yeah. It's in Long Island. But yeah, basically they gave me the runaround. Like they made it hard for me to like take classes. They didn't want to teach that anymore. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So it was like my hands were tied and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take this into my own hands. I'm going to learn how to use the CNC machine and I'm going to create what's in my head and I'm going to learn how to use this thing. We have Google, we have YouTube, things like that. And I self-taught myself in 5 years, exactly 5 years. And I know how to do things now with the CNC machine. I bought it myself. I have my 2 boys help me with the shed in the backyard to make it really nice into, a workable shop. And now I can possibly, scale this and, possibly hire somebody to make these things, to further my idea to help people, basically. You know what I mean? Help people that can't normally help themselves with my story, my background, the reasons why I'm doing this in the first place.
Well, and it's interesting because we're talking about using technology like Google or like looking at videos on YouTube. I mean, it is true. If there is anything you want to learn, it's just the discipline of actually, well, one, sifting through to find the useful versus the non-useful, but two, the discipline to actually do it.
Right.
But to use, again, the technology as we think of it now to help learn the technique of ancient Greek, talking about like craftsmanship and actual tangible things. And I think that's actually, I hadn't thought about that before, but when you think of all the cooking channels, all the baking, everything, all of that's on YouTube, how to fix up your house, how to sew a button, like those are things that our ancestors knew how to do. I mean, our grandparents, my mom, our like Christmas ornaments. I remember she like made, and she sewed my dresses for dances and for my costumes.
Yeah.
And she wasn't even like she was a working mom. Like she was not particularly fond of the home arts, we shall say.
Yeah.
But she still did it, and versus. And this is, I'm literally one generation later. I have zero. I don't know how to sew a button. I don't know how to do. I know. So
it's okay. I don't know how to do that either.
well, but I think that's so interesting. Literally one generation.
Yeah.
And I think that's very common right now. Like I just moved, and I'm like, I don't know how to hang up that shelf.
Yeah.
I don't know how to hang up. I don't know how.
Because everything is so convenient now. You can Uber your food to your house now.
That's how I
groceries.
moved. I literally moved using an Uber.
Yeah.
Yeah. And two of my really strong female friends. But you also have TaskRabbit, although the guy that I hired bailed on me at the 11th hour. So in that case, strong friends are very helpful. But yeah, like you said, living in New York City, where do you live?
Yeah, I live in Long Island,
Okay.
but I used to live in Queens and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like living in New York
Bouncing
City,
around.
it's like everything is so convenient, but also just going to the grocery store is expensive. So oftentimes it's about the same for me if I'm going to order using Seamless or if I'm going to go to the store. But there is something lost if I don't know how to cook my own food as an adult.
Yeah, there is. And you know what? If you do cook your own food and you learn, because I like watching Ramsay,
Oh, yeah.
Gordon Ramsay, and he told me a simple, like, what do you call it? Like a sausage type of meal. It was actually for stuffing. So it was like cannelli beans, and it was like chorizos that you buy, and just garlic, onions, and stuff like that. Very fast. Sun-dried tomatoes, like half sun-dried, and just put it in a skillet and it's done. Tastes ridiculously good. I'm like, Jesus.
Doesn't have to be complicated to be good.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually something that makes me actually think about your necklaces, because these, again, I know you can't see them if you're listening to this at home, but it's a heart and it's one pendant.
Right.
But it's just really beautiful, and it's beautiful in the simplicity. Like I wouldn't want to have, hearts going up and down or all these different crazy colors. So mine is blue. Can you share what this one is about?
Yeah, sure. So that one is specific to St. Mary's Hospital for Children. So half of those proceeds go to St. Mary's, and it's made out of curly maple. So I'm using curly maple only because the grain is not a straight grain, it's twisted, and it gives it like a better shimmer when you put the dye on it. And also I'm making a pink one now recently that I met Natisha Moore from the American Cancer Society. She's the development manager, and she's asked me if I can make a pink one for the cancer patients there, and she invited me August 13th to go sell them in the Bronx. So that's awesome too. And before, I just want to give a shout out to Richard Liguricio.
It looks like Ligurcio. I apologize, Richard, if I'm butchering your name.
He's Italian. All right, so Richard, he's my friend. If it wasn't for him, I just met him last year. He just started working, and for some reason, he's doing Reiki, so he's into some spiritual stuff that I'm not aware of. But he's cool. He has positive energy. He puts into it. He's been helping me sand these hearts. So it doesn't just carve the hearts and then it's done. We have to hand sand them. I have to put polyurethane or coating on it to protect the natural color. So for instance, that one is not the natural color, but the majority of the hearts, they're naturally colored. So I have a red heart that's actually kind of like a paprika red. And then I have a purple heart that's like eggplant purple. And then I have ebony, which is black. That's the most rare one. And then I have a yellow heart that's actually yellow. And that's actually their name. So it's very easy to remember. They're exotic woods. They come from South America or South Africa, things like that. And the rarest one is ebony, only because it takes a lot of years for it to mature and become black on the inside, on the heartwood. The majority of the other ones, they're pretty relatively... You can get them at specialty lumber stores. They're not like, like in an extinction mode or anything like that. They're readily available. But the ebony is the one that's valuable. So, and some of these, not all of them, but some of them come from the Amazon rainforest. We don't know exactly where they're coming from. So that brings awareness to how special and precious these natural resources are. People don't understand. They understand like diamonds are precious resources. In a lot of ways, that's something that's man-made, you know, for people to believe in. Well, these are also precious resources for real, though, because they are, like the ebony, for instance, you know, people are cutting them down. It takes a long time for it to grow. And it's precious in that way where we can actually lose this natural resource. So it gives people more education on the trees and things like that. And also to, you know, believe in my story, and also, I guess, have more love for trees, I guess.
So it's a win-win all around.
Yeah.
So last question is, how can people find you?
So you guys can find me at busycarpenterbee.com, which is going to most likely redirect you to my Etsy account. And I have my old hearts there. Soon I'm going to have the new hearts. Also, I have a link which I'm going to share with you that is kind of like a funnel where they can pre-order some hearts, and I have some hearts available where I can ship it out. And also the social media sites, so like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Busy Carpenter Bee, all the way around.
Busy Carpenter Bee. Love that name. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And for sharing your beautiful work.
Yes, appreciate that very much.
All right, Matt, bring us home.